Render options group inside our view options for applications. We have next properties. Render small picture for object before savings. So when we have an object and I right click, try to save this object, it will render small preview of this object, and this is if you uncheck, that won't be created. Most time I don't see a reason why you don't want save it, only if you want faster savings, or maybe you want to minimize some size. This way you want to uncheck, but in many cases these property options you would like to enable. Reset render when creating new scenery. Currently it's enabled. When I work, I like actually disable this, because render settings I want to keep it most times same, and this will apply to many properties. For example, we go inside, and many times you want to preview, render to screen, and set. This is my default render, how I like it. I don't like render in main view, I like render on a screen. So this is options I want selected. I want them save every time when I create it. If I said reset, these properties will always go to render to main menu and set smaller size. The otherwise unchecked, it will perform. As well, in many cases when you work with the main camera, you notice after exposure is enabled. So I don't like after exposure. I want to actually control lighting and many spotlights. And if we work with after exposure, that will mess up some of those previews, so I don't like them. Uncheck this way. And by reset render settings, this will help with some render to save as your default. Next, generate resume render info. This is an option actually used a lot, but you did not notice this option till you need it, and it's not enabled. What's happening when you render a long work and then for some reason you want to stop, do some stuff maybe, and come back, you can enable render your image, escape, which is save it, go to work on different project, come back and continue render. For example, if you have one machine which is a workstation, you don't have to render farm or other things, you can work on large scenery, start rendering overnight or wherever, come back next morning when you continue work on something else, stop this render, it will save this resume render info, load a total different project, work on this. When you're done, come back and resume your render on the subject with from point it will stop. So it's very useful utility what I used all the time, that options. Next, abort render on a click in the render area. Personally, I don't like this, because if accidentally you click your mouse, your screen, for example, goes sleep and you click somewhere, and that's maybe accidentally disabled. So normally I uncheck this property, because I like to use the escape key or other ones to stop my render, instead just clicking with mouse in render area. The next is flash voluminous data when render is completed. What is happening when view is a render, it saves a lot of information to speed up. So if you render once, you modify, you render second time, some of those properties as reference or caching for the maps, alpha maps, materials, textures, and maybe objects, ecosystem, this is information will store. So the flash this data, it's meaning it will clean up after render is completed. So that way the view can start clean. Plus and minuses, I notice sometimes minus it's maybe store information correctly about alpha planes or something, and it may affect it. You want to flash this, but most time uncheck, it will keep it cache, and it's actually perform a little bit faster because does not need perform this way. Remember, you many times all the flash data you can also using by purge memory, which is also will clean up some of those artifacts from the memory. So if you have problems with this and you don't want to enable this option permanently. Next, limit displacement memory usage. If you have a problem with memory on your computer, for example, only 2-4 GB, and Vue sometimes may run out of memory, you can enable limit displacement mapping and assign to specific. It's work mostly on terrains or object or some other way you use displacement. Just beware, if you have a number too low on this, then Vue will start swapping on your hard drives, which is reduce performance significantly. So in many cases you want to use this if you have a limited amount of memory on your computer. Okay, and the next option of render, it's render stocking options. This is mostly on the preview when the render is completed and it's showing you. So this is option for this render stocking. We have it after stock render, so it's automatically will add after you render image to your stock. The properties for this, you can stock render areas where you have it, previews render, depending on type. If you abort in the middle, it can save those partial render images as well. Normally I don't find them useful, so it's unchecked. You can also save a snapshot for each render that was occurred. So instead clicking snapshot, it can save that snapshot automatically for you when you render each time. Actually, this is kind of useful if you want to roll back. So, and I do like this option enable. You can also stock additional information as gbuffer, multipass, relighting buffer if it's enabled, and diagnostic buffer, which will look a little bit more on diagnostic and relighting later, but you can also save some of those properties. So next, you have it also stock limit, and currently I set to 10 gigabyte. This is not your RAM memory, this is your hard drive memory where it will save it, and it's set to 10 gigabyte, and I set to my secondary hard drive. And as usually you can have it quite a bit large size for this if you need it. You also can currently use the same stock for all scenes. So if I create it on one and I create second one, you can see the multiple images is occurred. So for example, if I go to preview right now, you can see as example I have many different type of the images I used to work earlier. So and this is kind of preview render creating for them, so you can see all of them as I work along. So not just single project, and you can specify this if you go in an option and you say I want in render stocking, I want to use a dedicated stock just for the currently scene if you want it. So next time when you open it, we'll use it all same except you exclusively specify for this project, or creating new stock for each new scenery. Remember, this property will add more and more to your areas, so because you can come back from different projects, and each project will utilize their own stocking area. So in this case, it's you will need to manage your space a little bit differently, because you won't see all of them at the same time. For purpose of tutorials, I do like use it same stock. So in this case, I can jump between different versions to show. But if you work on a project, create new stock for each scenery, maybe work better in that case. And of course, you can specify path for the stack, like your secondary or other hard drive or even network drive. You can edit or use the default when you install with Vue.